Hey all, I'm Elysia Buss, host of Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection, and today we have a phenomenal guest, Judy Brightman, who has one of the most interesting life stories I have yet had the opportunity to run across. Judy has been working with horses for 50 years, just like interacting with them, loving on them, learning from them, all sorts of remarkable aspects of horsemanship. And she currently lives in Sydney, Australia. I love Australians, but not only, she's like a transplant from there. And what's cool about that is she's actually from Redcliffe, Zimbabwe. Oh, and Sabona.
Sabona.
Oh gosh, one of these days I'm going to get it correct. Sabona is a wonderful greeting from the Zimbabwe culture. From the Zulu.
Yeah.
And I tried so hard, you guys, to try and get it right. I studied, and it's just, some words, they just don't always manifest the way that we want them to. But she comes to us from the global and corporate world of consulting, where she spent 30 years working with teams on leadership, and she's now brought that into the horse realm, and she's an Eponaquest Instructor, which is based from Linda Kahana. See, another one of those words. We all get to learn and practice all the time. But so she is here. She has been kind enough to actually drive somewhere that she has reception, because reception is not good enough at her house. We tried this once before and had an amazing conversation that was almost 3 hours long. I wish I would have recorded it. It was so epic, you guys. And it was the first time we'd ever talked. So we'll try and keep this one just a little bit shorter today, maybe. But there's lots of value to be had this afternoon. So Judy, over to you. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Elysia. It's so lovely to be here, and thank you for the warm welcome. And yeah, it kind of feels like, wow, I feel really honored to be here, and just so enjoyed our conversation the other day when
oh my gosh, me too.
There was just so many things we could talk about, but
so many.
Yeah, thrilled to be here. So thank you.
You're very welcome. So there are so many things to start with. So Mindful Horse, Mindful Leader is the name of your business, working with the horses in partnership. So let's just start with the basic question. What does mindfulness mean to you?
Look, mindfulness is a term that's bandied around a lot now. It's become very fashionable again, and I'm super grateful to mindfulness because it's really been such a help for me. Really, it's about being present, being aware of what is happening in the moment without judgment. So it's really, just not getting caught up in our monkey mind that's, worrying about things that we've done in the past or what might happen, and analyzing everything. Not catastrophizing the future, which is so easy to do, particularly these days when,
Indeed.
The future looks like so unsettled, everything's so uncertain. If we can stay in the moment, if we can be present to what is actually happening in front of us and around us, and notice without judgment, then we can come from a much more balanced and calm place. We actually have more access to our neocortex, and so more access to sort of good decision making and all those kind of things. So for me, it's been a practice that's been life-saving, many times through many experiences that have, I've had me, in great sort of drama or potential. I have great potential to get very dramatic about things. So it's been a very useful tool for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of all of that, can you talk to us about you? So I looked over some of your profile, and you talked about body intelligences of the mind, of the heart and the gut and the brain. Can you describe that a little bit more, and how it relates to us being present and how we process information?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's some great work out there about the body, and one reference that really brought this home to me is Candace Pert's wonderful work. Your body is your subconscious mind, because science has been able to show us now that you know, every cell in our body essentially has some intelligence and shares information. You know, it's not just all up in the head. Absolutely. So there are lots of neuropeptides, you know, that come through from the gut, and our heart informs our head. Much research around that now in terms of their having, you know, the kind of mini brain in the heart, you know, a second brain and a third brain in the gut is how some people refer to it. But we know that from a chemical perspective, you know, emotions arise in the body and are sent to the brain to actually make some sense about, you know, sense of it, to make a story about it, and all those things that our brain is so wonderful at doing. You know, it was, I forget who it was that said that, you know, the brain is, you know, a great servant, but a terrible master. And the thinking mind, you know, that's often the way it is. And we tend to, in these days, you know, we're so in our heads, you know, a lot of us are working in corporates in front of computers in our heads all the time. Yeah. Many of us are so disconnected from our bodies that we don't listen to that wonderful intelligence that comes from it.
I don't know how many times I've heard that as a massage therapist when I'm giving someone a massage and they're like, I had no idea that that was hurting. And I was like, about $1 for every time I heard that, I'd be like a millionaire.
You know, and it's really important to get people. And it's really important working with the horses to get people into their bodies to some extent. And of course, people who've suffered trauma are very often out of their bodies because their bodies don't feel safe.
Right.
So the survival mechanism. So the people who practice therapy, you know, with equines are really conscious of that and mindful of it. I'm a learning practitioner. But it's, you know, very much the case that we walk around, a lot of people are walking around like sort of, you know, heads on sticks, you know, it's, as far as they're concerned, they're sort of talking head thing. And they're not in touch with their...
informed work is so important so that people understand that, like, oh, it's not that you're just like upset about something. It's like a trauma has actually occurred and like affects your body. Like,
you know, we've all had trauma level. You know, whether it's little t or big T, we've all had trauma. And, you know, there's a lot of stress in the world today. There's so much information, there's a lot of overwhelm. And people, you know, are often in that state in a, you know, a low level of stress all the time and don't realize it. 100%, you know, they're not in touch with their breath. You know, and the breath is such a powerful force. It is our life force, of course. It's what inspires us, you know, when we breathe in and when we expire, you know, that's it kind of thing, you know, at this earth walk anyway, on to the next one. But, you know, it's really important in being able to regulate ourselves from a health perspective, you know, from a being able to have clarity of thought, you know, being able to make good decisions, and just in how we're interacting in relationship with people. If we're aware of what is going on in our body and what's arising, and oh yes, my heart rate's gone up, and oh yeah, my breathing's a bit more shallow. Oh, I can't feel my feet. Actually, I can't feel anything below, you know, my throat, which is, you know, for some people to recognize felt sensations is incredibly difficult. But if we can get people back in touch with those, and the horses are great at sort of helping people do that, because their big presence kind of helps them to come more present and mindful, and then they can start to sort of become more aware of actually what they feel. But when you work with the body and those sort of somatic practices, you know, it can have a massive impact on how people work together and work with, you know, person to person and horse, all those things.
Can you, for our viewers out there that don't know what the word somatic means, can you explain that for our viewers?
Sure. So soma was the Greek word for body, essentially, and somatic work is any body-based practice where we really become, in a very simplistic kind of way of describing it, but it's working with the body and the felt sensations.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I always trying to help people to frame things sometimes, because some of the things that we go through are not common terms for people that might be watching this show. So I'd hate for anybody to lose any piece of the valuable information that you're carrying forward for us.
Well, thank you for picking up on that, and please do on any other things, because I might have language, particularly for some audiences, coming from my background, I might say something that you think, what the hell is she talking about?
Also, because you're Australian, and as Americans, I've noticed that you guys have different phrases than we do sometimes, and I'm just like, what does that even mean? Like, and I have more and more friends in Australia, and sometimes I just have to stop you guys in the middle of your I'm just like, I'm sorry, just what was that?
I know. We had such fun when, the wonderful Shelley Rosenberg, who's one of the senior Eponaquest people and just has been in this field, with Barbara Rector from the word go and with Linda, and is just amazing. And, gosh, I owe such a lot to Shelley, but she was brave and courageous and came to Australia, just trusting me that it would kind of work out, and did some workshops and things, but and has been many times now, but she would educating her and translating things for Shelley just was so hilarious. It'd be just like, what the, yeah, great.
Yeah, it's one of the many things that I love about talking to people from other cultures, like all around the world, that there are so many fun phrases that we get to learn, because each culture is different. Speaking of which, didn't you study with some of the Zulu Shamans in Zimbabwe?
So with Shauna, there was, don't worry too much about that, but I was living in the predominantly Shona areas of Zimbabwe. So they have two major indigenous tribes there, the Shona and the Ndebele, and the Ndebele are like the Zulu, and the languages, are very similar to Zulu. And then there's obviously multiple sort of sub-tribes and other tribes around that. So lots of different ethnicities, but I've studied with a few, Shona and also Ndebele. But yeah, so I was very lucky to grow up in a very liberal home, because at that stage, obviously there was a lot of, you had a minority rule, a white minority rule in what was then Rhodesia, and then apartheid in South Africa, where I went to university.
Yeah.
And so, there was a lot of, awful entrenched racism. And I was very lucky in that I was raised by very liberal parents who wouldn't tolerate that. And so I, was able from an early age to listen to the stories of some of these wonderfully wise and funny, people who still lived in, quite traditional ways and followed their traditional practices, and, learned the importance of honoring ancestors, and the fact that everything in nature has spirit, whether it's a rock, a tree, just whatever, and the importance of honoring that and noticing it and living in relationship with nature, the animistic practices, as well as, understanding that there's intelligence and spirit and something to be learned from everything that we encounter. So yeah, very grateful for that. And also, the whole kind of drumming and trance, going into a sort of trance where, as we call it, in the sort of Western shamanic practice, it's going on a shamanic journey. But those kind of practices of being able to really seek guidance, which a lot of people would probably go like, oh, what's that? That's sort of woo-woo stuff, and oh, you just make it up. It's just imagination. But, my response to that is always, well, great, if my imagination's that great, that's wonderful, if it's working for me, if it gets me to a place where I just feel like I've heard something that's, important to me, or I've received some guidance, then that's great. If I sort of err on the edge of sort of mystical, but, Einstein said imagination's more powerful than knowledge because it encircles the world. So
yeah. And I mean, people go to church and they pray to God, and some people feel that they hear God. How is that any different? It's their connection to spirit. It's their relationship. Right. And so it's so important to not negate another person's belief just because it's different than yours. Like, just because their experience resonates within them in a different way. Like, it's this honor honor everybody and their different beliefs. It's like, as long as you're not hurting somebody and yourself, like, why does it really matter? Just be grateful for like the support and the love and the connection and the community that comes with that whole experience. That's what I think.
Exactly. And I think as well, I mean, I think it's very important to, you know, be mindful, very mindful of cultural appropriation, you know, and I certainly don't claim that I follow a particular tradition, but I've studied with a number of shamanic practitioners around the world, from different parts of the world, South America, North America, Ireland, etc., etc. And you know, pick the tools. I'm
like, back up a second. Can we talk about that for just a second? Because like, are you talking like druid sort of situation, or like, because I haven't really heard of like shamans in like Ireland, so I'm just really curious about that, because I have Irish heritage. I'm like a UK mutt with a splash of Italian and whatnot, and so I'm just like, wait. Hold on. We just got to clear something up really quick, and then we'll come back to the rest of the things.
Look, I was adopted, but I know that my biological mother was of Irish heritage. So, it definitely feels, you know, kind of sweet and true to an extent. But Celtic shamanism was a big thing. And I guess, you know, it wasn't possibly always called Celtic shamanism, but there's, you know, a number of practitioners in that way. And I guess it is. I mean,
it's a magical island. I've been to Ireland. Totally. It's magical there. Like, there's really something truly magical about that place. I don't even know.
I know, it's in the earth, and I've just had shivers all down my body as we talk about it. But it's like, you know, in Wales, there's you know, wonderful druid practices as well. So there's a lot of that. But again, it was the beliefs in honoring the cycles of nature, you know, watching what the moon was doing, watching what the sun was doing, honoring, you know, everything as having spirit and life, and having, you know, messages and wisdom, and, you know, the practices of, you know, meeting as a community and having ritual and ceremony. I mean, those are the essences of shamanic practice, you know, as we know it. And I think one of the key things, and why so many people are getting into shamanic practice these days, is you know, that sense of community, because we've got so disconnected from ourselves, even, let alone, you know, disconnected from nature, from the natural cycles. You know, we have all this electric light, you know, we sit in front of computers, we're indoors in air conditioning. How disconnected can we get, you know? And we're disconnected from communities too. And perhaps one of the good things that may come out of COVID is just that people have got more aware of local community and providing support there, and developing communities both locally and globally, you know, as you know, you're doing, you know, just through these, you know, so that, you know, the benefit of advanced technology, we can do these things and come together. But it's important, you know, we've been very much in the West individually focused, and community is important. And
even 15,000 kilometers away.
And all ancient cultures knew this, and knew that it was important to sort of get together, and particularly when there'd been traumatic incidents, you know, or in all rites of passage, you know, the initiation ceremonies. And frankly, the whole world seems to me to be in you know, a big initiatory event right now. You know, and then there's the drama, there's the things that really changes, everything changes, this big event, and then, you know, you learn from that, you gain wisdom and grow, but you come back into community to be welcomed and to integrate that process. And, you know, if those things don't happen, coming back into community and integrating, then, you know, then you've kind of gone like 2 steps out of a 3-step process. It's not finished. And, you know, we so often are leaving people in having these big traumas and initiatory experiences, and then we don't, you know, welcome them back into the community, and they're, you know, they're left outside, or, you know, there's no way to integrate what they've learned. And I think, you know, this is one of the things that's really missing in our world these days, that we don't get together. Just like, you know, in Africa, they'd all in the villages just get up in the mornings and sit around and discuss the dreams, because messages come to us in dreams, and talk about the dreams, and that would inform what was going to happen through the course of the day. And, you know, how lovely would it be if we actually, you know, just slowed down a bit and did that?
Definitely. And that actually brings us to another point that I wanted to talk about, which is social intelligence.
Mm, mm. So social intelligence is, you know, something I don't, it's really considered quite important in leadership these days. You know, it started getting talked about, you know, sort of post the sort of emotional intelligence that became, you know, I mean, emotions were something that were considered not to be, you know, welcome at all at work, and still aren't in some places. But,
In some
you know,
places.
yeah, but, you know, people like Daniel Goleman and what have you started, you know, talking about and writing about emotional intelligence and how important it was. And then
Thank
social
goodness for him.
intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, social intelligence just takes that little bit further, really, because it's about not just managing your own emotions, being aware of your emotional state, being aware of the impact of other people's emotions, and how those come together, regulating that, you know, which is the core of emotional intelligence. But social intelligence is really about how we're interacting with each other, so how we are in relationship. So it's just, you know, sort of slightly different. And a lot of
this book
yeah,
here, you guys.
yeah,
So there she is, Linda Kahanov.
Linda Kahanov,
Kahanov. The
and
Power
then of
of
course,
the Herd, and it talks about a non-predatory approach to social intelligence, leadership, and innovation.
that's right. And you know, very grateful to Linda for her, you know, groundbreaking work in this field over the years, and her courage in putting herself out there. But yeah, her last two books, Power of the Herd and The 5 Roles of a Master Herder, which came out of her research for Power of the Herd, you know, really promote and suggest a socially intelligent leadership model. And I'm very grateful that we eventually persuaded Linda to come to Australia for the first time
Nice.
2 years ago, to accredit some of my Eponaquest instructor colleagues and I in the Master Herder model. And she did some workshops here for the public in Master Herder and sentient communication and things. And so that was just fabulous. But the model is really easy to understand, makes a lot of sense. So it's great for teaching to leadership cohorts. And the thing about social intelligence is that it's quite hard to teach person to person, because when we, you know, there's all these filters that we have, you know, we're playing a part, you know, we have a persona, you know, and everything that I see comes through the lenses of, you know, the people that brought me up, the culture that, you know, that was surrounded that, the institutions that I've, you know, been involved in, my, you know, my education, my personality, the lenses that I've looked through from my experience, you know, all these things, and then how I'm expected to show up, or the, you know, how I think I'm expected to show up when I'm in a work environment. All these things come to play, and even they do in leadership training too. You know, it's hard for people to take the armor off and take the masks off and be vulnerable in front of their peers, or if you're working with teams where you've got, you know, senior people and then some of their reports there. I mean, that's, you know, challenging. So when you're trying to teach things person to person, there's always that layer of, you know, well, are you responding authentically, or is it just something in this person's makeup that makes you, you know, sort of feel that way, whereas with this person you respond very differently. And the horses, when you work with the horses, of course, they don't put the analysis into it, you know, they just respond to what's showing up at the time. So it's very authentic and very non-judgmental. There's no language around it, there's no judgment, you know. Language is so easily misinterpreted. You know, it's just very clear from a horse, and it, you know, and they don't mind, you know, frankly, whether you're the CEO and have a, you know, flash car, or whether you're, you know, the office cleaner and don't have a car, you know, that, and they don't matter what color skin you arrive in, they don't care what clothes you arrive in, any of those sort of things.
They don't care if you're skinny, they don't care if you're fat, if you're fit, if you're
exactly.
They just want you to show up as your authentic you, not the one that you present to the world all the time, potentially.
Exactly, you know, and we know that horses, you know, the more your insides match your outsides, you know, the more comfortable a horse is around you, but they show us quite clearly how the impact that we're having. And so even things like our posture, and this is a big part of, you know, coming back to tying in the somatic pieces as well. With leadership, you know, if you're, you know, if you can control your breath, if you can align your posture so you can be vertically aligned, and give yourself more space, you're standing in your dignity, you know, you've actually noticed your width as you're centered, you know, standing and centered, and you notice your width, which actually is your sort of connection to others and relationship. And you become aware of that in subtle shifts in posture and breath, and then clarifying, you know, kind of what is it that I want to do? You know, here it is, here I'm going now, we're going forward, you know, as opposed to going like, come on, I'd like to go forward. Would you like to come? Would you like to come with me, horse? You know, and which we all see like, people do. And
so
you know,
nice, horse. If you could come with me right now, gosh, it would be great. Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah. Exactly. Or we get into the whole dominant thing of going like, oh, you know, trying to drag the horse, you know, or
right.
you know, sort of drive the horse in. And there are times when that might be the thing that somebody needs to do. But you know, mostly, you know, we want to lead by inspiration and get people. If we get people inspired and believing our vision as a leader, then you know we can win their hearts, and then they will come with us willingly, rather than having to drag them at the end of a 6-foot lead rope kind of thing with their heels planted in, where you know then they're not going to be as effective, and you know they're not in boots and all. We need to be in boots and all, and leadership for me is a full-bodied experience, and to do it well, you know, that requires social intelligence, and I've yet to see anything, you know, that teaches that faster and better than being in a paddock with a horse, I have to say.
Can you talk a little bit about the social structure of a herd and how it connects to the social structure we have as people, and like how that helps people to be able to work through metaphor and move through things?
Yeah, sure. So I get, you know, acknowledging Linda's work, you know, she, in her research for the power of the herd, which, you know, from which she came up with these 12 guiding principles to leadership, she came across this, you know, nomadic tribes in places like the Pyrenees and in Africa, where you would have herders driving, you know, big herds of big cattle with big horns, the big sort of horns, with no fences, you know, moving them around nomadic cultures, and you know, being able, small boys, being able to control or you know, lead, direct this big herd of cattle without any containment. And you know, the same with sheep and other animals. It still happens. There are not very many nomadic cultures left, but there are still some. And she got curious about what it was that enabled them to do that. And she also got, you know, reflected back on things that had helped her with some of her horses, and particularly, you know, Linda had a stallion who had been terribly abused, and she and Shelley Rosenberg worked with Merlin, Midnight Merlin, to really sort of help rehabilitate him, and he taught them both a lot about this kind
remarkable horse.
Yeah. And so she started thinking about what it was and came up with these 5 roles. And so they were the dominant, the sentinel, the nurturer, companion, the leader, and then the other piece was the predator, essentially, the predatory power. And if you look at how that relates, I mean, with horse herds, there's a lot of misconception about dominance, and unfortunately, you know, it's still something that's really prevalent in a lot of, you know, equestrian professions and professionals and amateurs, and in the wild, horses are not, there isn't a dominant horse, you know. Leadership is situational, and you know, there isn't the sort of alpha. Yes, there's a stallion. Sometimes there are a couple of stallions in a band. You know, Lucy Reese's wonderful work in this space is well worth reading for anyone.
We'll put it in the resources, guys and gals.
Yeah, but there are moments of dominant behavior that even in wild herds, but it's more often seen actually in domestic situations where, rather like people, we are competing for resources sometimes. And so Linda looked at the sort of the sense of the dominant, and we'll take the dominant first because it's so prevalent in our culture. And it's so prevalent in workplaces. And I mean, frankly, there's nowhere where it's more prevalent right now, probably, than America on the political stage.
It is what it is.
And, and she talks about, mature use of dominance as being that really important driving force. Sometimes you need to sort of drive people towards achieving a goal, drive ourselves towards achieving a goal. And that direct and protect kind of behavior. So, directing where the team needs to go, where we as a culture need to go, where the family needs to go, where you need to go, or your horse needs to go. We take that direction sometimes and, ask, more firmly. But when it's used maturely, then dominance can be a very protective thing. People will, protect their people that they're responsible for. Or I'll protect my horses. I can get, my dominant comes out very much if I see someone interacting with my horses in a way that I don't like. I get very protective about them.
Understandable.
So, and then but the immature dominance that we see, which is that really kind of lashing out, competing for resources, wanting to take the lion's share of everything, using people's vulnerabilities against them. All those kind of things. That's the type of immature dominance that we see.
Insecure dominance, I would say.
Yeah. Well, Linda calls it immature dominance because it's sort of typical of like teenagers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you think of, even, young colts playing together, it gets pretty full on, they can, really rough and tumble, but they what they're doing, and as you see the same, I, was lucky to see this amongst many wild animals, not just zebra herds, but many herds of, the teenage boys just start to get, really quite, rowdy with each other. But what they're doing is testing strength. They never typically in the wild will hurt each other because, that particularly in a herd, and we're a, socially intelligent herd as people, rather like horses. If horses injure each other, then that's a problem for everybody. The safety in numbers when you're out, as a, I don't like to call horses, prey animals as such, but, they are sometimes seen as, prey animals, and, they live in a herd, and their way of protecting themselves is more often to leave, to put distance between themselves and where a danger, as opposed to the predatory animals like lions and so forth, who seek, hunt down.
Yeah, and people, I think a lot of times people think of the stallion as leading the herd, but it's my understanding that horses are a matriarchal society.
Well, yeah, the stallion has his role to protect, obviously, and but typically, because of the bands, the family bands that live together are, mainly females, they're mainly mares, then it will certainly usually be a mare that will, kind of lead the charge away and take them to resources, because the stallion will be often out on the edges, looking out for, playing the sentinel role, looking out for potential threats, So yeah, there's a lot of misconception because I think we've observed so many, horses in a domestic environment about dominance. So mature dominance definitely has its place, and immature dominance is kind of there. And when you think about teenage boys, unfortunately these days, a lot of teenage boys don't have good role models. And if they did have good role models, then I'm sure that we would have far fewer problems and far fewer teenagers, getting into that trouble and getting into juvenile detention and these kind of things, because, they would be given a container and a role model to, test out. This is how, I can be assertive. This is how I can, use that testosterone in a good way as opposed to, a destructive way.
I am seeing more men's groups around the world, like men stepping up as leaders and creating like a really healthy container for personal development and support so that men can get what it is that they need in a non-judgmental fashion. And I've seen more young men in some of like the personal development courses like Zoom calls and whatnot that I've been in, and that's been really encouraging to see. And so while it's still like on the lower end of like percentages, I think it's nice to see like an upward trend of men like really healthy men like stepping into the light and really wanting to guide others. And I just want to acknowledge that and give it like validate it and give it value and say thank you to those of you out there that are really stepping up and being good role models, because there are a lot of good men out there. And I hear so many women complain about there not being good men out there. And so I know that we've run across a lot of non-ideal people, but there definitely still a lot of really good men out there.
Oh, totally. And, you know, the other thing is that we all have that balance of masculine and feminine energy within us. You know, we all have that. And it's really, I mean, I think a lot of, you know, what we do in terms of personal development is trying to reach a state of inner harmony and balance. And so we need to have that masculine energy. There is a time and place for it. The young, the fiery energy needs to be there, just as, you know, the feminine yin kind of more watery energy needs to be there. You know, there is
for us strong women, we need to balance it back out too.
You know, there's the, you know, in shamanic terms, they often talk about the dark masculine and the light masculine, and the dark feminine and the light feminine, and it's balancing those four things within you, you know, that is part of spiritual and personal development, and also part of, you know, becoming an effective leader. So there's definitely a need for that. And I agree that there are more and more, you know, men stepping up.
I wasn't sure how it was in Australia for you, but in America, you know.
It's definitely sort of happening, particularly I think with some of the indigenous peoples. I think that is, you know, terrific that we're seeing some elders come forth and some younger people really striving for change and stepping into that, which is great. But, you know, and women, you know, certainly in the corporate world, and a lot of the women I see on some of the leadership programs that my colleague Jackie Smith in particular, I've worked with a number of different people, but I want to honor Jackie Smith here, who is a fantastic, fabulous colleague and leadership development consultant, and we do a lot of the horse programs together. She, you know, we've seen people that, you know, they're you know, very dominant and immature dominant behavior displayed by women who often feel that that's the way they have to get ahead, you know. So it's definitely not a, you know, a gender defined thing.
Absolutely not. I couldn't agree with you more in that regard. And that's where just like trying to have healthy role models across the board, regardless of gender, and gender identification and like everything on the spectrum, because humans are humans. It doesn't really matter how you would want to assign and fall on that spectrum, but it's just about being authentic and being kind and respectful and engaging people in a way that you would want to be engaged with to the best of your ability, because growth is an evolutionary process. You know, it's like any problem that we run across in life, it's like a kaleidoscope, right? Like a crystal. And we have to, and through the crystal creates a white light, but the white light is created of all the colors of the rainbow. And it's like the problem goes through that crystal, and we have to learn each part of the prism to be able to come through purely in that white light before we don't have to face that problem anymore. And while it might look like the same problem and again to other people, and they're like, why are you always doing the same thing? And you're like, well, I'm not, because I learned from last time and now I'm looking at it through a new lens. And so my internal experience of that problem is different, and I'm growing. And then one day I won't have to do it anymore. Won't that be great for all of us?
That's so beautifully said. And totally agree. You know, very few things are actually linear processes in my experience. So, you know, they're arcs, they're serpentines, they're
I mean, it'd be so nice if they were linear. You know,
thinking of the circle though, just coming back to the sort of the 5 roles. So the nurturer companion is a very there's that container of creating that circle that's safe, so the nurture companion role is often the social glue in a company, and very often overlooked, because they're the people that sort of take care of and make sure, check in with people, make sure people are doing okay, but also kind of know what this person is doing and what that person is doing, and can connect people really well, so hence the sort of social glue. But Linda had sort of noticed and found from her research that what these herders did with these nomadic herds was they drove them, they watched out for them, the sentinel sort of view, but they spent a lot of time just hanging out with them, mingling with them, and scratching them in places they couldn't scratch themselves, and doing that sort of nurturer companion role, taking care of them if they were sick or those kind of things. So really important role, and sort of binding them together, very often undervalued in organizations, very often overlooked from a leadership perspective. And so then there's the leader role, which is of course leading from the front, really. It's you'd see these young herd boys, and they were typically young boys, but sometimes they're women, sometimes they're older men, but typically they're younger boys a lot of the time in Africa. And you see them I've seen them leading cattle, and the cattle following behind them, just all falling into place. And it's just that being totally aligned and clear, everything stacking up, the body language, the clarity of vision, and just that force of sort of bringing them along with them. So it's leading from the front, and there's a drawing energy to it. I mean, it has its potential downside. If people get too far ahead and then lose touch with the herd, then you're going to have to go back and pick them up, type of thing. So there's a lot of depth and layers into this model, but from the purely sort of high level that we're talking about it today, that's obviously a key role. And that's we really need leaders who are lined up and clear and have vision right now. We need that very much in our hurting world, and luckily there are some which but we need more of them. And that's why I think everyone is a leader. Everyone is a leader of themselves, if nothing else. We like to talk about conscious influence rather than power, because power can be such a negative word for so many people, because we've seen so much of it abused. So everyone can have conscious influence over their own life, and conscious influence, and use that to great effectiveness in their organization, in their whatever that may be, not non-profit, for-profit, whatever it is, or with their families. This plays out in families so much. And and then of course the role of the sentinel is often overlooked too. The sentinel is a really important role needed now in this COVID, and highlighted in COVID-19 in many ways, because the sentinel, of course, is like the stallion, kind of head up, looking for threats, checking for danger. And right now you've got a lot of people who are pretty hyperactive on their sentinel. That's the thing. It's it's easy to get hyper vigilant, and I'm sure this is affecting a lot of people right now, getting really hyper vigilant and staying in that level of anxiety. Horse, think of for those who are horsey, think of horse head high up, really on high alert. We know when the head's high, the heart rate's up, and then the cortisol's right, all those things are happening in the body that if it stays for too long and we don't run it off or go back to grazing and relax, then move it through the body, then we will have physical consequences. We'll end up in
sickness,
stress, and disease.
All sorts of dysfunctional patterning in the body through like fascial and muscular tightness, and then you're just why am I so stuck and hurting, and things aren't processed as well internally when your
shoulders up round here, and I can't move my neck.
Oh my gosh, we could go on and on and on. You know, you're
Yeah.
in you're in a unique position because of your life history to be able to talk about this with the COVID, with the protests. You've been an activist your whole life, if I remember correctly. And having been raised in Africa and going to university in Cape Town during apartheid and experiencing those multiple levels of racism, because you had friends who were of color in the indigenous tribes in Africa, and
Yeah.
getting to see how they were treated. And obviously your family was liberal, which is so fantastic, especially for the time frame of which you were being raised and the location. And so some of the similarities that you might be seeing with what you experienced in apartheid versus the protests now, and obviously you're in Australia with the, you know, indigenous people there that you know.
Yeah.
So the question would be like, what similarities and differences do you see between the protests and the apartheid, and also the social intelligence within the herds of horses that we can overlay into the social intelligence issues that we're seeing in a fear-based condition with the protests? There's a lot to unpack there, I know, you guys.
Yeah, there's a lot in that, but look, you know, it's when we discuss something like this, you know, here I sit, yes, I may be female, which you know, kind of gives me one point of being potentially in a repressed you know, kind of part of society, but you know, there is so much institutionalized and systemized racism that I think for many people, you know, are only just starting to realize that. And you know, we've had apartheid; it was just so very clear, you know, and it was, you know, enshrined in law, and you know, it was brutal and awful and unforgivable, you know, in so many ways. And yet, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission there, that, you know, people like Bishop Tutu and others brought apart. Yeah. You know, was super powerful in helping to sort of heal some of the really grievous, you know, what many of us would consider unforgivable wounds. Those, you know,
and your family was close with Tutu, isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah. My parents were friends with Tutus. Yeah, and you know, I think the good thing about what happened with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was that it gave people an opportunity to really speak their truth and say what was going on for them at the time, and to hear it. And it was done in community, and you know, people all got to speak. And it's rather like in Indigenous circles, you know, where you're given the talking stick, and you know, you talk and you say it until you're complete, and then you pass it on. It was a little bit like that sort of process. Those kind of processes we know can be very healing. And I think a lot of what is happening in the world is that those processes haven't happened. No one's heard, you know, and I'm, you know, white and a native English speaker, and I'm cisgendered. So, you know, apart from being female, potentially, you know, I've got it really good. I'm in, you know, the very privileged position.
Yeah.
And many people are not. Having grown up where I did, and you know, being raised the way I was, I think I've had probably a clearer kind of, or a different, you know, maybe a different perspective on racism that many people who haven't had that exposure have. Yeah. And it's endemic, and you know, it's you know, there's a lot of terrible racism in Australia. It's not. This is a pretty much a worldwide problem, I think. You know, and certainly Indigenous cultures have been, you know, trampled many,
all over the world,
you know, all over the world.
Millennia.
But you know, for particularly, you know, for Black people in all over the world, I mean, they have really been, and people of color and Indigenous tribes have really been overridden and marginalized and treated abominably, and had so much of their culture stripped from them by being forced into, you know, education and belief systems that, you know, weren't theirs, and being, you know, actually, you know, stopped from, you know, sharing their own, or even speaking their own languages. And you know, that's those are abominable crimes, frankly, that are being perpetuated. And we know that we inherit trauma, from at least our grandparents. We know now that that is the case. And when you think so much intergenerational trauma, that is relatively fresh, in fact, very fresh in those peoples. We're not talking sort of the, thousands of years ago that, the Romans colonized Britain, for example, and things like that, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it all started going a bit pear-shaped in many ways, despite the fact that, the Romans gave us a lot of good things too. But, it's really around that. And I think I see a lot of similarities. I see, feel a lot of the pain. It's high time, it's high time that this is raised, and that we really start to look at what we're doing. And the people say, well, if you're not actively trying to destroy something, then you're enabling it. All it takes is the good man to stand by and do nothing. That kind of thing. So I think it's important for us all to look at how we perceive the world, look at what we're doing, look at our biases, try and shed some light on our unconscious biases. And really just try and step into other people's shoes and get really good at perspective taking and empathy rather than feeling attacked. Because I think there's a lot of people feeling attacked, by this and go, yeah, well, I'm not personally a racist, but, I'd say, well, look at that, because I know there's been times when I've been a racist, and there probably still are times when I am, and that would definitely be unconscious now, but, people can, tell you that, and we should be brave enough now to have those discussions and be willing to take the armor off and go, okay, let's look at building solutions. Let's not keep going back to the past and, sort of blaming each other and pointing fingers or, anything like that. Let's find solutions. And I think socially intelligent leadership is required to find good, innovative solutions to problems, to the world's big problems today and to our little problems. And I think that the way that the horses interact with each other and what they show people in this lovely non-judgmental way can really help people, come to terms with some of their own trauma and some of how they're showing up and some of their biases that, they weren't conscious of before. I think there's a wonderful way that we could work with this, and my biggest hope is that we could get more people of color and from Indigenous tribes, and I know it's happening, from Indigenous peoples around the world to, work with horses in this way. Because again, working with horses has been predominantly a very privileged white thing to do. It's
yeah,
not
I was
cheap.
just going to say that, I mean, if you look at our industry, with the equine assisted learning and mental health and therapeutic riding and all those things, it is a predominantly white industry. And it's really interesting how I feel like there are more trainers. Oh, did we lose you? Oh, there you go.
My battery's running low, so I might just have to plug it in.
So there are some women of color, and I'm always so excited that when I see people of color and when I see more men engaging in the work, because I oftentimes just run across white women doing the work that we do. One of the things that I'm looking forward to doing is for my personal piece of it is that I am planning on trying to go to different schools. So high schools oftentimes have job fairs, and I want to create a presentation, even if I'm not physically there, that somebody can run so that we can engage with more people of color, especially, and let them to know like the multitude of jobs that we have available in our industry doing equine assisted learning and mental health and therapeutic riding and all the different models. I mean, there's something like 150 different models of work that you can do in this particular field and how it can empower people so that the kids can know that it's out there, like animal science in colleges, like veterinary medicine. Like there's so many different things, and there's so many intelligent kids in these schools that are just not being given the opportunities that the rest of the people are. And so to present this information to them in a way that they can succeed and see hope and be passionate, it would be great. So that's my plan, to bring more color into our field.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's, getting, I think, particularly, with a lot of the mental health problems, that we see in those marginalized communities, it would be, fantastic to see more of the people that are doing equine facilitated psychotherapy and, mental health work, going into those areas too, and collaborating with elders and with people. I mean, because I think, there needs to be great respect, and not white people going in saying this is what to do, because again, that can just be unwelcome, and it might not be received well, it might not land well with people. So I think
I totally agree and appreciate that reminder. That's a great reminder. I know that that's an issue with the First Nations people here in America, that they don't particularly like to have outsiders come in and try and teach their kids or tell them different things. And I love the just the connection that they have with horses. They call them the sacred dog here in the United States. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I just love that. And to be able to connect with people. I have the horse follow closely with Native American horsemanship. It is so beautiful. And yeah, so if I could connect with more people to get to bring that message forward with different communities, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, it's really important to get, people from those communities engaged, and their elders, if they're interested in this kind of model, if that can be made accessible, and it probably requires some grants and funding, because it is expensive to do some of these programs. But I think that's really important. We need to get into conversations. We need to just take off the, lay down our shields and and our swords, and just go with our, our hearts in our hands, and have open conversations with people, and with all people, really, and just kind of see, well, what would help, because we can't be everywhere. But I know here there's a couple of people with of Indigenous heritage who are now practitioners in this space, and Meg Kirby did from Equine Psychotherapy Institute in Victoria, did a program that was culturally appropriate in Western Australia, I think last year, memory, in conjunction collaboration with an Aboriginal educator. So, there are things that happen. It's slow, but I think it's really important. And I think the time is, COVID's kind of laid back the time, I think, for this too. There are a lot of wounds, there's a lot of hurt out there, there's a lot of fear. And so all these things that are kind of shadowy and murky are coming out, I think, now. And I think it's the right time for it to come out. And it's good. I mean, I've protested many things in my life, and I think, it's important. It's important to speak up.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Oh my goodness. Could you give an example to our audience of an activity that you think would help with the horses with this particular issue? I know I'm asking you for something off the cuff.
So with, in terms of kind of reconciliation, are you thinking, or?
Sure, just anything that would help along the lines.
Yeah, it's such I can think of a few things that might happen, but there are so many activities that we can do that kind of have people trying to work together, or two different sort of teams trying to come together, to achieve one goal. So there are multiple things that I kind of think of having a sort of setup where you've got perhaps a group over here and a group over here, and there is a kind of laneway down the middle, and they're trying to sort of work together, perhaps without speaking, just to encourage a horse to come with them down this laneway and to travel together and negotiate some obstacles, one of those classic kind of things.
Yeah.
At liberty, obviously not coercing the horse, but just trying to actually communicate and get collective intention focused on.
So at liberty, folks, for those of you who don't know, is when you don't have any rope or anything connecting you to the horse.
Yeah, because the last thing you want, and particularly if you've got a group of people, that's a lot of different nervous systems and energy.
Oh my, yes, you do.
That can be, I mean, they need to be able to make the choice to leave.
Yes.
They not expect them to have to stay in that environment. So that's something that just comes to mind as a kind of, coming together and trying to, get on the same, page and work together. I love to do a lot of, just one-on-one, deep relational reflective work with, individuals and horses though. So I think, there's herd observations and just being in place in a herd meet, and just connecting into the energy of the land and tuning into, what's going on in your own body and in your own heart, and then connecting your heart to the, the horses that are near you, and really grounding, centering, really feeling part of the earth, supported by the earth, held by Mother Earth, and, connecting in, with sort of spirit from above, with the sky and the stars and the sun, and feeling that light, and fill your heart and expanding your heart light, and having people do that sort of exercise, because we all have a little light in our hearts and we can make it grow, and expand it way beyond our own body, and send it out to the herd, to the horses, and send it out to each other, standing in a kind of circle, is a very powerful activity to do. And to me, those simple, very profound, where there's no kind of task, where you're just tuning into the being rather than the doing, are so much powerful, and so much, and they're very healing. And to really connect a circle, with all your ancestors out behind you, all the teachers whose shoulders you stand on, all that support behind you, and the horses' ancestors too behind them, and just being, safely, with facilitators watching with eyes open to keep everybody safe.
Yes, keep everybody safe.
Just being very mindful, because that can be a very powerful experience for people, just to connect and really connect and share, and connect to each other, and imagine all their heart lights and all the horses' heart lights just shining around the world. I mean, it's, for me, beautiful, reflective spiritual practices like that, or, those kind of, they're spiritual for me, but, just connected, and relational, the most powerful and profound things. And a lot of healing and a lot of insight can come in those moments. And that's why you need facilitators with their eyes on around, because those emotions and things that can arise in those kind of times can be overwhelming for some people. And,
Absolutely.
to be there to keep people, just physically safe and emotionally safe. And remember to pick up the pieces afterwards, and, follow up if what someone did start to have a really profound experience and is, perhaps a little unraveled, or a little, it's triggered something for them, particularly for learning practitioners. We need to be very careful that we follow up, and that we check that people do have some sort of support, spiritual counselors, psychologists, whatever, but that they have support and can get help. And if we, if someone is left us after a workshop or a session, and we're a bit concerned something's been triggered, these things bubble up, as I do. As you're driving home, or later when you're reflecting, and a few days later something suddenly hits you. We need, as practitioners, to really be very mindful of always following through and making sure people are supported beyond the paddock.
Couldn't agree more. Which reminds me, I would love for you to share with the community what our greeting means. When you were talking about the Zulu phrase, I think that this is a really beautiful moment to bring that in, as the why and what the response is to that.
Yeah, so sayabana means I see you, but it's it's a greeting that's really profound, and greetings, you know, things are slower in indigenous tribes, and you know, you take the time to really greet. It's not, hi, how you doing? And just to expect a good answer back, you know, it's like
all right.
And really, you know, stop and like a namaste. I see you with my heart. I see all the potential within you. And the response is nikona, which means I am seen because you see me.
Such a beautiful thing.
It is. And, you know, it's like the whole Southern African concept of Ubuntu, which is, you know, a person is a person because of a person. You know, we cannot exist without each other. I'm seen as a person simply because another person sees me, and I can only be a person because of another person. You know, we are so connected, and it does, you know, apply to the whole world. We're very connected. We think that we're very individual, but we're very dependent on each other. You know, we need each other, and we need to remember that. You know, that's my whole philosophy, is really to just get people, it's connection. You know, my mantra, and you know, my tagline is calmness, connection, compassion, one breath at a time. Because, you know, we need to get calm or quiet enough so that we can, you know, get in touch with ourselves and center on the earth and connect to the earth. And in that way, we can then connect to others.
Yeah.
And it's not a question of, it's a circular thing again. You know, you've got to connect to yourself, but maybe you're connecting to yourself through another or through your connection to the earth. It's a circular thing. But to connect to everything, and then I think when we truly connect to ourselves, others, and, you know, the earth, the world around us, and all those in it, all our relations, then we can have far greater compassion. And doesn't the world need a lot more compassion and kindness? And that's what I want to see in the world. That's really what underpins and drives everything I do, is I want to see a kinder, more compassionate, connected, calmer world.
And thank you very much for that, Judy. It's a beautiful sentiment, and that what we all need so much of. And in that vein, I always like to have people share some obstacles that, or an obstacle that they overcame to be able to accomplish their dreams, in hopes that it may inspire another person out there who's struggling to be able to know that they're not alone, and they too can accomplish their dreams despite how difficult things may be at times.
Yes, well, I've got a whole list of those. I could probably
throw the scroll out. How much more time do we have? Maybe we'll just choose like one or two, and if the horses were involved in helping with any of that's cool. If not, that's also totally fine. Yeah, fortitude is great.
There's been a lot, and I guess I'm grateful for them as well, because they, you learn from these things.
She's gonna write her book someday, you guys. It's gonna be an epic. They should probably make a TV series out of her life. I got to hear some of them. I mean, like, wow. I'm sorry.
I've had some interesting times, but I think, you know, for me, I think, you know, one of the biggest obstacles was, you know, frankly, myself and my own, you know, lack of belief in myself potentially, and was I worth doing this? You know, was I worthy of it? Who the hell did I think I was to be going out doing this, and all those kind of things?
Sure, yeah, no, I get it.
A lot of work and unpacking in that. Yeah. And, you know, I've had great guides on the journey, and I'm grateful for that. But, you know, it's, financially, you know, it's been a struggle, you know, sort of just making the choice, you know, committing to this path, and then making the choice to, you know, go into it full time. I'd intended to do it sort of slowly.
Yeah, I understand the feeling.
I can't how I started. And it was just, I'm going to do this, you know, so weekends, and I was working from home sort of one day a week, and that enabled me to do some work from prepare for workshops and do some things, give me a bit more time. And I was thinking, yeah, do this, I'll just do this and do weekend workshops and some weekend practice, and slowly kind of build it up and get a name out there, etc. And then the universe kind of gave me a little slap and said, well, no, that's not going to work. And the company I was working for was sold. The guy I'd been working for had a huge blow up with the CEO, and he left, and then the CEO sold the company, and it was just going to be a nightmare. It was just not going to be possible with the new owners to be living the kind of life that I was, or working from home, or having the flexibility. It was going to be a full-on kind of driven 8 to 8 kind of every day, or at least 5.5 days, 5-6 days a week kind of work,
Yeah.
There was just no choice then. And so I kind of just lost all of that income and had to start building this other business. And it tied in with a whole lot of other things that then came along, which was the place that had sort of manifested for me to do this work, which was fantastic and was so beautifully set up. I was renting it, and I was thinking, it's great, it's all come together. Wow, great manifesting. And then money was really tight as I'm trying to sort of manage this, and I've got some horses boarding and things. And I created some, disasters for myself by making some really, foolish choices on a few things. And and then the place I was told, the owners called me up and said, oh, this has happened and this has happened, and we're going to move in and you're going to have to leave. And it all just sort of, I was, oh no, how's this going to happen? And, what am I going to do? It's just been perfect. And now I've got to go. And where am I going to work from? And, money was so tight. And and I was coincided with an anniversary of the death of my soulmate horse, who pushed, took me down this journey. She pushed and nudged me down this journey, and was just amazing. And I'd lost her just sort of a year or so before that, and I just crashed and burned for a while. I just fell into a depression. I was obviously looking after the horses and doing those things, but I was really not functioning very well for a while. And when I kind of woke up out of that fog, was like, oh, there's no money gone, and I've still got no money.
Now what?
Where am I going to go? And anyway, various things happened with that property, and that land held me so beautifully for some time. And it took a lot. It was a great learning in letting go and learning to trust. And really, it was it was the land, and it was the horses that enabled me to get through those times, and to really just get still and trust and let go and trust that the inner voice, and have the quiet guidance and the messages that the animals would give me. And not just the horses, who were amazing, and really they were amazing, but also just the birds and the other animals on the property that would just show up, and the various other presences on the property that would show up. It was a very special time, a period of huge growth for me, but huge challenge. And and I remember once saying to my little pony mare at the time, Jazz, and she'd sort of made it quite clear to me that she wanted to work with little people. And I'd spent so many years working with predominantly children, but also adults, in riding for the disabled, in my years there as a voluntary coach and committee member for however many years, nearly. And they and the RDA here is like PATH in the US, the Therapeutic Riding Association. And anyway, Jazz wanted to work with little people, and I wanted to work with adults, mostly. So I had a few adults coming in, but anyway, I said to Jazz, my little pony, I said, well, if you want little people, then bring them in. You get them. And they came.
She's like, I'm so cute. Like little ponies do sometimes, how they flip their mane. It always cracks me up. They're so funny.
She's gone now, sadly.
I'm sorry to hear that.
far too short a life. But yeah, she had this divine mane. She was a little Leo actually, and she had this really beautiful mane that many girls would killed for, the colours of blonde, little Welsh pony that was
Oh
through.
God, I love the Welsh. I love the Welsh ponies.
Very pretty, just and totally the divine child, but very comfortable in her own skin and very confident about what she wanted and could have. So that's sort of some of the things. I mean, there's been so many, I've had to sort of, I guess, deal with so many of my own issues from traumatic experiences that were unacknowledged, and sort of in so much of the grief and things that I had repressed for a long time, that all sort of came out through various parts of this journey with the horses. And I'm grateful for all the people that held and supported me, and but mostly I'm grateful for the horses for getting through that. And I think you've just, again, coming back to the people who started me off in this place, Barbara Rector opened my heart and showed me what was possible, and I'll be forever grateful to her. And Shelley Rose.
About?
Oh, just through Kerry Johnston, who's another great inspiration of mine, who was a very influential coach in riding for the disabled here. She'd gone to the States and looked at various equine facilitated learning models, and having read about it, and wanted to try and bring this into RDA and certainly into her own world. And she did some work with Barbara, and then she came back from that and was talking about this work, and she talked about Linda's first book, The Tao of Equus, and I was kind of like, I hadn't gone there at all at that point. And so it was her that really kind of drove it. And so Kerry really drove and get equine facilitated learning as a discipline within the RDA here. And it was a long struggle, and anyway, she to convince people that it was a safe thing to do, to have horses, to be on the ground, with horses that are at liberty, and not attached by ropes or anything with people. It was seen as really not a very safe thing, because there's a lot of safety and risk management, rightly so, in RDA practices. So anyway, Kerry passed the baton to me to chair that organisation, and we eventually to chair that discipline within RDA, and we did eventually, along with my other colleagues, get that happening, and accredited some coaches, trained some coaches in it, and the number of colleagues too many to mention, but it was that it was that connection that led me to a workshop with Barbara, which was just opened my heart, as I say, and changed things. And then all roads seemed to lead back to Arizona, and I went to a workshop with Shelley Rosenberg, I wanted to do Black Horse Wisdom because of all its sort of shamanic spiritual bit with Linda.
Yeah.
And that was an advanced workshop, so you had to do an intro Epona workshop first, and one, I was visiting my family in Canada, and one that worked in time-wise was something with Shelley at her place then in Sonoyta in Arizona, and so I ended up going there, and then Shelley just was so generous, and it was another kind of just fantastic experience with Shelley and Dr. Nancy Coyne. And then Shelley was kind of really serious. Like, she sort of said, like, oh, I could come to Australia. I'm like, yeah. And she mentioned, and she mentioned, and she kept in touch, and she was brave, and she trusted me, and it happened. And we got a whole lot of workshops and things happening. And, but Shelley used to just say to me, like, I want you to believe that you can do this. And she kept repeating, I want you to believe that you can, start your own, you can make a living doing this.
Yeah.
And I didn't for a long time, and then eventually I did. I got it. So, so I'm kind of grateful. I'm very grateful for all those wonderful teachers and those people and influencers. But most of all, I'm grateful to Indigo Flame and all the other horses that subsequently have brought me along this journey and still, you know, teach me every day such profound things and you know, hold the space for people so beautifully. But yeah, you know, you find ways to work. Just, you know, don't, sometimes we think when the universe throws something, it's just hard, it's hard, it's hard. We keep questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And I think, you know, there it's like, if you can get quiet and get that guidance, which can be hard when you're stressed and, you know, you're really on such a tight, you know, margin financially, like how am I going to pay the bills next week or even actually at the end of this week, you know, and just trust that things will sort of come along. And it's hard to do that when you're under those kind of pressures, but, you know, that's where my shamanic practice I found really helpful, and trusting those guides and time with the horses, just gifting yourself reflective time with your own horses instead of just doing around your own horses, which is often the trap that people fall into. And colleagues too. I was so grateful, you know, to colleagues that, you know, so I have someone that we will occasionally just swap each other a session, you know, a reflective session with each other's horses, and that's
love
great.
To see more of that happening with people.
Yeah, you know, because to get it, you know, because when you're at home and with your own horses, there's always that other lens that can come in, and to, you know, it's just really helpful. It doesn't take a lot just to find that, you know, the moment of peace and quiet and get some insight when you spend some quiet time in a paddock with a horse, and particularly if you've got, you know, someone who can facilitate that experience for you as well. That can be, you know, just beautiful. So yeah, I think believe and find ways to work. Like when I couldn't work anymore from home because of changes at the property and construction and stuff that was happening, and, you know, the poor horses were just all shut down and it was so noisy and awful. You know, then I went out, I reached out and started trying to work with other people and at other places, you know, and I'm grateful I've met so many, you know, wonderful people in this work. So there's great people I can refer people to, and there's people with wonderful properties and herds that I can go and, you know, hold workshops at and that I can co-facilitate with, and like, you know, so many people who've helped along the way, you know, and colleagues like that I've worked with, like Camilla Mowbray, and who's very close, you know, like 30 minutes away type of thing in Sydney. And
yeah, didn't you create like a community that you guys get together once a year in Australia?
Well, we get, so in New South Wales, we get together, and that came out of when Linda was here and did the indoor seminar, Master Herder Model, and a bunch of people came together there. And I was introducing a couple of in the same sort of area geographically, but probably hadn't met each other. And then, you know, we kind of realized that, you know, we could, I think it was Louisa Farthing there who said, let's all, you know, get together, and she drove it. She's up in the Hunter Valley, sort of probably about 2 hours. I'm on the outskirts of Sydney in the northwest, and about an hour from the city, and she's probably 2 hours further up north. Drove this gathering. So twice a year, May and November, we have for the last now 2.5 years we've been meeting, and different people coming in. So we hear about, you know, people's challenges. We share challenges. We share how, you know, of the people that we like, you know, we work with, how great. We'll, you know, share some activities and experiences and things. And yeah, it's great to have that sort of network, and that keeps growing, of course, because there are more and more practitioners coming in. And then May, of course, we had to do it on Zoom.
It's about collaboration, not competitism.
Yeah, because, you know, it worked really well, because it's hard, you know, as you know, when you work with horses and you're doing this, you know, when you're a one-man show and you've got all the things, all the roles to play in a business, it's really hard. And it's hard to get away. You know, take a couple of hours to go and drive somewhere, you know, when you've got all the chores to do that, you know, never end, can be challenging. So we actually all agreed that the Zoom thing worked really well for us. And we did so as nice as it is to get with other people and, you know, with other horses. But yeah, growing community, and I think, yeah, we should have more of that. You know, it's important. We need to all work together. We need to get out of the sort of scarcity mindset of, like, and competitiveness. And I can understand, the people that started this, that pioneered this, it took a lot of courage, a lot of courage to put it out there, because it must have been seen as really quite out there.
Yeah.
And I know I've had a number of sort of personal attacks, from people, with putting this stuff out there. So they're brave, and I'm grateful for their courage at putting themselves out there, the people that have driven this, so many who did. But then, it's sort of got more models to up, and some people are very protective about their models, and others are really open about them, and just, encourage people to sort of, take the tools that they, have learned from that model and use them and develop them to suit their own practice, which to me is the way it should be.
Right. Your own life story helps to inform your work, so you can meet people in authentic fashion.
Yeah, you don't want to be rigid, I think, personally. It wouldn't work for me to sort of rigidly apply a model. That wouldn't work for anyone.
Understandably.
But I think the more tools that you have in your toolkit, but I think the openness of collaborating and supporting each other is important, because, we all bring our own individual unique contribution to the work that we do.
Absolutely.
And while you might like working with me, some people would definitely not. And
good to be able to honor these things. We're not going to resonate with everybody.
Yeah, be served better by someone else. And we've got to be aware of our scope of practice, but we also, I think, by sharing and collaborating, we get more awareness out there about the power of this work. And again, this work is not, for everyone. It's not a miracle magic fix. And I think the people that sort of promote it as, go spend time with the horse and, everything will be fine and you'll be healed and yay. It's not like that,
Like some people that believe in Waldorf education are like that. And I get to say that because I'm a Waldorf teacher. So.
But, there isn't a silver.
It's amazing work. It's just not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. Like nothing in life is. Like people are different. You can't just pigeonhole somebody into something and say, like, this is the best of everything.
Yeah, some people coming and, working with horses. I know a few people like that who just, shudder at the very thought of it. And that's fine. But there are, there is there's growing evidence, particularly, I mean, obviously it's a hard field to get really good research in. But there's certainly in the therapy piece, there is growing mounting evidence that, there are benefits to this. I mean, we all know anecdotally
about science. Makes me very happy.
Yeah, amazing benefits over the years. But it's important that we don't think that it's a one size fits all, and that this is a, magic thing. And I think, how we market our businesses is, important in that respect. And that if we do ourselves and the whole field a disservice if we claim to be able to be all things to everybody, because we can't. And then people will be let down. And, I've heard from a number of people who've had bad experiences doing this kind of thing. And often it's because someone, hasn't, the practitioner, hasn't been well trained, or, wasn't, hadn't, might have just done a kind of a brief workshop and thought they could just, play with their horses at home and do this a bit. And, you do need to have some good training and supervision, and do your research and keep doing the work, keep doing your own work, keep abreast of what's happening in the horse world, in terms of horse behavior. And so much that we used to believe from the natural horsemanship piece of kind of about licking and chewing has just been blown out of the water. We know that, that doesn't, it's not about submission or anything like that. And, Rachel Dreismer's wonderful book about calming signals, shows us a lot of things that we, misunderstood in the past. And, so we need to keep doing the work. We need to keep raising, our own standards, and we need to have best practice, for the benefit of the field generally. And so I think, the more we collaborate and can share resources and share knowledge and, open a door for someone, or make a suggestion to someone else and learn from them, then the better we will all be. So I'm a great one for collaboration, and I think to go and work with other people, especially when we're solo practitioners, is really important, because we can get too kind of stuck in a groove. When you work with other people, not only is it working in relationship with other people as opposed to just with your horses and clients, which is good for us for our own development, but it's also you learn something from the way people say things and the way they interact with people. You pick up a little tool here and think, oh, I love that, I love how she said that.
Yeah,
yeah, that's borrow that, is that okay? And and it's just great. I come back to Shelley Rosenberg again. She's someone that doesn't say a lot, and I learnt this from her. And this interview may point to the opposite, but when you're working with the horse, I don't say much. I get out of the way and let them.
She's just like, oh my gosh, I hardly talk to people. We're just gonna like put it all for like the entire interview. We'll be like, people will meet you and you'll be all quiet. They'll be like, she seems so much more talkative on the interview.
It's really important, and I learned from watching her how important it was to just shut up and get out the way.
It's true though, working with people and horses, it's really important to just shut up and get out of the way. That was a learning curve for me too, and I'm grateful to have gotten better about it, because I talk a lot, because while I'm an ambivert, I'm more heavily on the extroverted side, and I always want people to win. So it's just like, oh, we'll do this, oh great, now on to the next thing, instead of just being quiet and letting them go deeper into the experience of the work. So that's always a nice thing to hear people like bring up, to be like, hey guys, just a nice reminder, since sometimes we get caught up in things.
Yeah, exactly, because it's about their experience, not what we think is happening. What we think is happening may not be what they're experiencing at all. But yes, but Shelley, when she said so, I remember someone at a workshop saying to me, man, she doesn't say much, but when she speaks, it means something. And I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yes.
And another that Shelley said to me once was like, Judy, do you realize no is a complete sentence? And I love that.
Oh, like, let's just sit on that for a minute, people. That's just such an important one, that no is a complete sentence. It's one of the things that I love about working with horses, because horses help us with boundaries. They help us to be able to read that nonverbal communication, and to be better at being able to acknowledge the importance of boundaries, and sometimes what we don't recognize within ourselves and how we affect other people. Because we can affect other people even by not speaking, just how we hold our energy, the nonverbal cues that we give. There's so much that a person says without saying anything at all, and how their boundaries can sometimes be trespassed, and how they can push on other people's boundaries without even saying anything. And I think that's something that's really important for people to start to acknowledge and to be able to work on in a non-judgmental fashion. Because the thing is that like, people don't know what they don't know, and no one should be judged for that. There are people all over the world who have been in circumstances where things have never been modeled for them in a different way, for them to expand their consciousness. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means that there's something else that they need to learn. Like, all of us have something else that we can learn. It doesn't make us better or worse than anybody else. It doesn't matter what our education is. It doesn't matter what our culture is. People have different intelligences. They have different life experiences that will make them wiser about something than we are, no matter what all the rest of their life looks like, no matter the words that come out of their mouth. Like, everyone has their own special intelligence, their own special gifts and skills. And when people can put their ego aside, or acknowledge their ego, and then be like, thank you for telling the ego, we're not going to do that right now. And now I'm going to meet this person in a more humble and open manner. That's where real respect and connection comes, and the ability to hear another human being when you can put your own construct aside. and see them as the beautiful being that they are, regardless of the construct that they might present, but the one that they hold in their heart. So that's meeting like a person heart to heart. That's just so beautiful about getting to be here on this planet at this time. There's so many opportunities, despite the fear and negativity that is oftentimes shown to us. So horses are great to help us with that.
So agree. And the horses they're such a great leveler in that way, you know. They just meet people where they're at, authentic, which is what, you know, we need to do. And I mean, but our job as facilitators for them as well is to, you know, just create and hold a safe space, you know, to allow. And really, you know, for me, I think, you know, yes, there are activities you can do, and yes, you know, you do throw in some activities, particularly for sort of leadership or the corporate groups where, you know, they do need to actually do something to learn, and they also, you know, just frankly are so out of their comfort zone. If you don't give them a task of some sort, that, you know, that it's all going to fall apart. You know,
we all know those people.
For me, the stuff that I like to do, you know, I love just the really quiet, relational, reflective work, because it's so powerful. And I think, you know, when I first started this, and this is another thing I think for people, you know, you used to think that you needed lots of bits and equipment and you know, stuff, and you really don't. It's very simple, and the most powerful practices are always very simple. They're the most profound, you know. Just I've watched enough quiet moments where, you know, a lot has happened, and then just a little bit of, you know, facilitation and guidance from me has resulted in people saying that was life-changing. And that's really, you know, amazing. I mean, how
can you share just one story, a profound story with us before we go?
I'm just going to plug my earphones back in so you can hear. Or is it okay as it is? Because my battery's charged a bit.
Oh, it's fine. Either way you'd like to do it is completely fine.
Okay, then I won't fiddle if you can hear me okay.
I can.
The mist has lifted. You might have noticed. I told you it was a very foggy, cold morning, and while I'm sitting here, the sun's now shining in.
I was going to say it looks very shiny and bright behind you.
I know, I'm going to be in sunlight soon. So
it's like, oh, surrounded by white light.
The sun is here. Heart rules.
Morning has come.
I mean, I can think of a few, but I mean, you know, one example when that happened was just, and so often it's the way, there was somebody in a corporate group who had some horse experience, and of course the poor person that has some horse experience owns it. Corporate. They've got all this performance anxiety then, because their peers are looking to them to go like, well, you know how to do it.
Right.
And this person wasn't just one of those people who's kind of like, you know, ridden a horse a couple of times, or you know, she'd had horses at home. And we were doing a very simple exercise where, you know, there was an obstacle course. It was an immunity to change kind of setup. So people were testing a limiting belief. And the horse work is great for working in that Kegel model of immunity to change, because it's you can set up a real safe to fail experiment in such a beautiful way.
Yes, indeed.
And so it was one of those things, but this person was trying to connect with and catch a horse that was loose in this, you know, enclosed space where there were some obstacles, and they were going to, you know, then try and guide the horse. They were going to put a halter on and lead the horse through these obstacles, and she would get this close to the horse and he would just lift his head and turn and move away, and she would get that close again and again, and all her peers are watching, and of course you can see and I could feel, you know, because you know what it's like when everyone's going like, oh yeah, you just go and catch that horse, yeah, sure. you know, and so I could see what was going on. And, you know, you're in these corporate groups, you're always in limited time. And I think it's really important in a corporate environment, and in any group workshop, not to shame anyone, you know,
Yes.
make really that they are not shamed in public. And it
Absolutely.
reaches a point, was reaching that point where you could see her kind of, you know, that shame was going to start rising. And so I stepped in, you know, I was in there with her, and I just moved closer with my back to everyone else so that no one else could hear or even see that I was speaking, you know, far enough away from the people outside where my co-facilitator was kind of, you know, holding the group there. And, you know, and I talked her through just, you know, just what are you experiencing?
Right.
And the front, you know, and that's sort of like, oh yeah, why don't you do that again? You know, because just let some air and let's breathe, you know, just let's, you know, let that go. And, you know, you just talk through a little kind of just let go of the expectation for now. Yeah. And let's just, you know, breathe, ground, center, pause. And that shift in letting go of the expectation has a massive impact already, you know, on anything.
Yes.
It's like, let that go, the pressure just goes. So that created a big shift in her body, and the horse already, who'd been going off and then trotting away, you know, and going right over to the other side. We were in quite a big enclosure. The horse started reapproaching. Anyway, and then I talked her through a way that Eponaquest that Linda and, you know, Shelley and others have taught me in working with the horses and taking the pressure off, and just like a little back and fly, and just slow approach, really observing what was going on with the horse's ears and any little signal that, you know, is feeling the pressure on his kind of boundary, so that whenever you meet it, you know, you take the pressure off, rock back and sigh, and wait until the horse, you know, signals that it's okay to come in again. And it's really important, so very important, you know, if you're approaching the horse sets the boundary as far as we're concerned. If the horse is approaching the human sets the boundary. So I just coached us through this very process by me observing what the horse was doing, and just like, just stop now, rock, you know, rock back, sigh, and then go again, and talked her through it. And within, you know, just really seconds, really very short space of time, big truck just pulled up next to me. In a very short space of time, she, you know, I just said to her, like, you've got him now. And she just, you know, raised the head collar, and he just was very happy to have her put the halter on and lead, and they, you know, finished the thing, and he went along with her totally happy. I mean, as soon as she got, you know, when I said to her, got him now, and she put the head collar on, just the look on her face, because, you know, just the relief, but the beaming smile that, wow, I'd done this, because it must have seemed agonizingly slow for her.
Wow.
And she went through it, and it was just like, that was life-changing, you know, for her, because just that approach had taught her so much about how she showed up, what her own horses did, and what people in the office did when she brought this big energy, you know, to them, and the way, you know, when she wasn't you know, really calm and centered, and all these kind of things. And, you know, it just had that, she made the connections herself to all these, you know, kind of things that explains why. And for her particularly, she said, you know, it was life-changing, because she knew it was going to change her relationship with her horses at home. And that is beautiful. You know, I'm always so grateful that whenever, you know, we do some corporate work, that if you know, we just change people's attitudes to other sentient beings and give them a chance to look at things differently, which they always do. I've had, you know, my colleague Jackie and I were lucky enough to go to India last year, and you know, working with these tech company leaders, trying to get them off their mobile phones was like the huge challenge at first. Then working with the horses again, you know, just to see them, to really honor the relationship, and to drop the task and not even try and complete a task, because they so honored the relationship with the horse, and to be moved emotionally to tears is just profound, you know. And again, that another thing, when they said to me, you know, I'd done a sort of soft eyes thing with them and shown some body things, and they were like, man, that's so simple, but that's profound, you know, that really is going to impact. I'm taking this home with me. I've already called my wife, you know, it's before the end of the workshop, couldn't let the phone go. I've already called my wife and told her that she has to come and do this. It's so small shifts like that, even for these, you know, what we think of as the talking heads of just, you know, corporate leaders, significant moments, in very small, profound ways. And that, you know, and from a spiritual perspective, from a personal development perspective, you know, I work, you know, with someone who just, you know, realized through a simple leading and connection exercise, just how she was showing up at work, and how she needed to shift and change her posture, and why her last 3 jobs had been disastrous, because of she just kept bashing heads with people, when she realized how she was showing up. And, you know, she was out of work at the time and coming and coaching to try and, you know, kind of sort stuff out.
Yeah.
And then got into, you know, learned through the sort of the process, like how she could show up better in interviews, and did so, and, you know, then got a job that was really quite a dream job for her. She's loving it and has a whole different relationship now with her boss and her team, you know, quite a senior woman. So those things are, you know, are amazing. And another woman who is on a personal development journey, who, you know, really unlocked and connected with so much grief that was hers, but also her mother's, you know, through a series of generations of breast cancer and things that had come through, sort of loss, and some deep personal loss for her. And just, you know, the fact that she'd, you know, she learnt with my big 16-3 hand, beautiful boy, that gelding, that he, you know, she said to me, just, I have realized now just the support he offered me, that I have never had true support from any of my partners. I've been the one that's always held everybody up. You know, and there's profound things that you can acknowledge and grieve, and that give you insight into how you can, you know, improve your relationships. Wonderful moments.
Yeah, those are all really beautiful stories, and I am so grateful for you sharing them, and with me and with the audience, and for your time. It's been, oh my gosh, we did it again. It's been like 2 hours since we started. I can't remember how long we talked before. I think this is by far the longest interview for anyone. If you are still with us now, almost 2 hours later, many blessings to you, my friends. That is amazing, and I appreciate your dedication to the subject matter at hand. And I feel very blessed to have gotten to spend time with you today yet again, Judy, my new friend. Yeah.
Indeed. It's lovely. Thank you so much. I know we could chat forever, but you know, I'm not going to chat for the rest of the month.
Well, that's only a few days, so I'll see you in about a week and a half. All right, my friend. Thank you, Judy. Thank you to all of our audience.
Thank you for all you're doing to bring this out to the world and connect people.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Judy. All right.
Lots of love. Blessings on your day.
Thank you. You too. Enjoy.